do like that music very much, don't we? Good evening, gang. It's Wednesday, the 28th of September, 2022, and welcome to tonight's United Kingdom Talk. Tonight's Chris Reardon live. My God, that's a good start. A £3 tip already. Thank you very much. Who sent that? Blimey, you sent me a tip already. I bet that's you. I'm not going to guess. It's not a competition to see who can send the most, you know. Hang on a minute. Who sent me this tip already? I barely even started. Gosh. Let's see. Oh, we're having trouble here. It's going round and round. The old circle of death is going round and round on the mobile phone. Oh, I can't tell at the moment. Hang on. Let's try and log in again. Let's try that again. Sorry. Hang on a minute. I was all of a fluster earlier. I couldn't get the. I was hoping to go live on the Facebook and the YouTube at the same time, but for some reason something was going terribly wrong there, so it didn't happen. But it doesn't matter because you're more important, YouTubers. Here we go. Right, okay. I think I found it now. There we are. One moment, please. It's from Omar. Thank you very much, Omar. You're very kind. One of our karaoke people as well, aren't you, Omar? A very, very big thank you to you, okay? On the show today, in around about 5 minutes' time or so, we hope to have Mark Stevens talking to us. He's an ex-BBC engineer, and you can ask him all sorts of BBC questions. He's going to come on and tell us about his time at the BBC, all right? And that should be happening round about 8:10. Fingers crossed that'll all work out well. He's going to talk about his 40 years with the BBC. My God, you'd see some changes there, wouldn't you, actually, when you think about it? I mean, I've been doing this, I don't know even how long I've been doing this as a video show. I think we're 12 or 14 years now. But even so, I've seen a lot of changes doing this. You know, we started off with this. Actually, it's still here somewhere. Where is it? There it is. There we are. I think this might be the first little camera I used. I don't know. There we are. Started off with this little thing there. Okay. And it was all a bit of an accident, really. And I was doing this as an audio-only show, like a podcast. And I did that for a few years, and then someone said, put a camera in front of you. So, I don't know about that. Anyway, I did, and it was something like that. It might not even have been as good as that one, actually. And the picture was kind of... It wasn't even standard definition. Now and again, it was a bit pixelated, because, of course, we didn't really have broadband speeds that I've got now. I've got 200 meg coming down and 20 going up here. But we didn't have anything like that then, and it would break down, and sometimes it would work and sometimes it wouldn't. And fast forward to now, and we've got a high definition Brio camera, one of the top ones in front of me there, and 20 meg going up, and it all works so well. And that's only me sitting here in a spare bedroom. You know, you imagine the changes you've seen at the BBC, I suppose. For example, lights, stuff like that, lights. I used to go into I was talking to Ross Patzelt last night on Reach On Air about this. And I remember going into the TV studios in the sort of very early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And my dad used to take me to TV shows at Call My Bluff, That's Life, Love Thy Neighbour. We went to see it London Weekend. George Hamilton IV, Bruce Forsyth's Generation Game, the first time around, yeah? The first time around at Television Theatre, which was in Shepherd's Bush. And I was remember it was so hot in there. The lights were so hot. Now, you know, as you well know at home, you know, got these LED bulbs all over the place. You can put your hand on them, don't get burnt. Some of them don't even get warm. They're stone cold. You imagine the stuff you've seen change at the BBC. We'll talk to Mark Stevens, hopefully, in about 5 minutes' time. All right, my loves. Let's say hello to some of you. You can join in on the chat box. The chat box gets very busy. Sometimes it's difficult to find out the messages for me and the messages you're talking to each other, so it might get missed. Best way to contact me is from the text message at above there, 07451 287 337, 07451 287 337. Okay, so let's say hello to some people. Gary Ross is there. Good evening to Gary. Greg's there. Evening to you, Greg. Greg is in the house. Hope all is well. Rather nippy here in Hampshire, as indeed it is here. But in here, it's not the lights, obviously, like I just said to you. These are fluorescent twisty things I've got here. Quite old now. But the computers keep it nice and warm in here, so I'm all right in here. Thank you, Greg. Don't put the heating on. No heating until December. You must restrict yourself. Gee, I don't want to be even hearing that gas meter of yours going around. Thank you very much, Greg. All right. Good evening to Richard Morris. He said the date on your clock's wrong. Oh, so it is. Why has that stopped? That's wrong, isn't it? What is it? The 28th. Why is that stopped? I've been having a bit of trouble with this, actually. I have been having a little bit of trouble with this thing. I can't get the day to go round there, though. How's that work? Oh, Christ. Oh, hang on. That's the day, isn't it? Hang on. What is it? It's Wednesday, isn't it? Hang on. Let's put it on Wednesday AM and see what happens. Hang on. 23, 5, 6, 7, 8. There we are. Wednesday PM. Thank you, Richard. There we are. Wednesday PM. Amazing. There we are. It's September the 28th, Wednesday PM. Hang on. There we are. All right. Yes, that's been given me. I changed the batteries twice now. And for a while it worked. In fact, it worked until Monday. So it must have stopped Monday because I kept checking it every day. Of course, as soon as you stop checking it, it starts going wrong again. I think that's that clock might have had it. We need a new clock. Actually, there's a really nice one, like a radio. So like for radio studios, there's like an LED thing, which looks really good. I'll see how much they are. We might have to replace that now. Thank you, Richard, for kindly pointing that out. And always remember, Richard, in, never out. You know what I mean? Never, ever out. Only in. Okay, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Shania. Good evening to Shania. Good evening to Fran Green. And Vera from Vera's Choice in the Morning is with us as well this evening. Good evening to you, Vera. Hope you're well today. Over in the chat box, nice and quickly there. Hello to, I think we've done Jason. Joey's there. Evening, Joey. Mandy Davenport. Richard Crooks. Good evening to you, Richard. Welcome to the show for the very first time, Richard. I think I've seen you up there. Morning to you, Richard. Evening, rather. Richard. Dan Woodhouse says, enter Dan Daniel. Is it Dan Daniel today? Woodhouse, Woodspouse? You keep changing your name, Dan. Are you claiming benefits under various different names? We do take a very dim view of that on this programme, my darling. Someone take his name. Who's in charge tonight? Is Mandy there who's in charge of pain and suffering on this channel? Are you there, Mandy? We might need some spanking tonight for Daniel Woodhouse, darling. He keeps changing his name. I think it's for tax purposes or something like that. Eh? I mean, what is your name, dear? God's sake. Thank you, Dan. Good evening. Gary Ross can't watch because you've got no TV licence. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can't watch anything live that is commercial. BBC, ITV, Sky, not allowed to do that. However, a little man... Where's the little man? Oh, here. A little man sitting in a spare bedroom all on his own is perfectly acceptable. I believe you are allowed to watch live YouTubes, okay, as long as they are, I hate to say it, personal YouTubes and nothing else. All right? So there we are. Hello. I've got a feeling that's our Mark. Is that you, Mark?
Yes, Chris. How you doing?
Evening to you, Mark. How are you tonight?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm very well indeed. Are you on a speakerphone or something?
Yeah, let me do a bit of fiddling here. Just talk for a minute, will you?
Okay, I'm very happy to talk for a moment. I'm very happy to talk for a moment. I'll just run down the list of people on us with us tonight. Lee Westcombe, evening to you, Lee. Welcome to the show. There's Mandy Davenport standing by to give out punishment to anyone who misbehaves today. Hello to you. Good evening to Weird City this evening. George Bond is with us. Evening, George. Heidi Young is there. Evening, lovely Heidi. Hello to you, Heidi. All right. And that's everyone, I think. Hello, how are you? All right?
Hi, Chris. You still there?
I'm here, yes.
Can I call you back, straight back?
Yeah, please do.
A different phone.
Okay, mate. Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Yeah,
okay.
Did sound a little bit iffy, that, didn't it? Mark will call us back in a moment. Dan says, blimey, Heidi Young, Fran Green, and now Diane. Everyone's coming to the party. Everybody's coming to the party. It's Grandma's party tonight. You'll know that one, Dan. You'll know that one, Dan. was talking to Ross Patzelt last night. He didn't know what Ed Stewpot and Junior Choice was yesterday. Absolutely. Hello, Mark.
Hi, hopefully that's better for you.
Oh, yeah, that's much better. Thank you very much, Mark.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with my mobile phone, but there you go.
Worry not. Now, Mark actually messaged me. He was for 40 years. I think it was 40, was it?
It was 40 and a half years, to be precise, Chris.
40 and a half years at the BBC,
Yeah.
which means he's probably got a fantastic pension, if there was anyone out there who wants to get...
Well, I don't know about the fantastic bit, but it's livable.
He's got a nice big pension, and he wanted to come on and tell us about his time at the BBC. What year did you start there? That must have been...
I was very young, Chris. I must stress this so much to you, that I was so young when I joined.
Right.
I joined on the 1st of September, 1980.
Okay.
I left last year, at the end of March, 2021.
And was it overall? You must have seen so many changes in that time.
So many changes, Chris. You won't believe it. I mean, let me tell you, when I started, it was the analog world.
Yes.
There was none of these computers.
Yes.
And it was all like reel-to-reel tape machines and record players and all the old technology, which I loved. And I was a sound engineer for the whole career. That's all I ever did, sound. So it's no good asking me about the lighting or the cameras because I won't have a clue what to say about those.
All right, okay. I used to, when I was a kid, I used to send off for stuff because, of course, before computers, any of those graphics, I know you say you did sound, but you'd know this anyway. All those graphics we would see, like programs tonight on BBC One, now someone types that into a screen, don't they?
That's right. Well, I mean, when I started, that was a card. That was literally a card.
Yes.
Which a camera was pointed to.
Yeah, and I used...
And the credits at the end of TV shows was on a roller. And there was somebody who used to turn a little motor on, and it used to scroll up the roller, which often got jammed and got stuck, which didn't really matter so much on pre-recorded shows, because we could just redo it. But on live shows, it was a bit of a nightmare.
Oh,
There's a famous, on YouTube, if you search for Stuart Morris...
That's the one! I was just going to mention that. I've seen it. It's hilarious.
The roller gets jammed and he gets a bit worked up about it. But
yeah, there's like a gallery. The gallery, by the way, is the place where like the producer and all that sit. And they've got all these screens up in their place and the buttons and all that all over the place. And there's a recording of the Eurovision Song Contest 1986.
Yeah, I can't remember what year it was. Was it 86? Could have been.
Somewhere around there.
All kinds of things he was getting worked up about, wasn't he?
It was it's hilarious. I've listened to that so many times.
Yeah.
And then right at the end, this roller gets stuck. And he said, "Where's the roller? Where's the effing roller?"
Yeah. And he keeps telling the network director on BBC One to shut up.
Yeah. What made you want to go into that sort of job then?
Well, actually, it might be helpful to you and to your viewers, Chris, if I just quickly spend a couple of minutes explaining exactly what I did.
Please do.
And how I got into it, and then that might help if people have questions or you have questions for me. It could maybe clarify exactly what you can ask me about. Shall I do that?
Yeah, if you would. Now, the best way to ask a question is please to text it in or email it. My email address has come up on the screen there for you. Because if I start going into the chat box, it's difficult to pick out who's asking questions or not. So the best way, I will try, however, if you can't email or text in, put it in the chat box. But the best way to ask a question is to do it by one of those methods, and then it will come straight to me and it'll be ready to ask Mark whenever he's ready to take some questions. So far away, Mark, go on.
Right, you asked me how I got into it, really, and the answer to that is quite simple. My dad worked for ATV, Associated Television, which was one of the... I mean, your younger viewers won't probably understand what we're talking about, but you're my age group, and you will know what I'm talking about, I know. And ATV was originally was the company that served the Midlands Monday to Friday, and London Saturday and Sundays. Then London Weekend got the Saturday and Sunday franchise, which meant ATV got the whole 7-day-a-week in Birmingham, because I was born in London and my dad worked in London for ATV.
Right.
But of course, when they lost the weekend franchise, we all had to move up to Birmingham. And my dad worked for ATV. He used to take me in and watch what was going on.
I bet you
I was always... Sorry, go on, Chris.
I bet you were absolutely fascinated as a boy to see that.
I was one of these boys who took things apart.
Right.
You know, just to see how they worked.
And could you get them back together?
Well, not often at that age. I've got an older sister. She initially used to come in as well and watch, but she got a bit bored of it. She got more into horses and boys.
Right.
So she's 7 years older than me. So so he used to take me in, and I used to watch all kinds of things happening. I was taken to Telecine Control. Before there was video, there was a thing called Telecine, which is basically film, like in the old cinemas where you have the reels of film. And that's how they played in programs on TV. They had them on reels of film, and it was called Telecine back then. And I would spend time watching the guys there and talking to them. I was only about 8 or 9, and this was obviously not in school time, obviously. And then I was also ATV presentation. I was taken into there to watch how the presentation was done.
Oh, did you meet Tom Edwards?
Yes, Tom
You
Edwards.
did?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very good. He's a good friend of mine. Yeah.
All David Tomlinson.
Yes.
All the announcers at the time. But also onto some program sets. I was taken shown the set of Crossroads, which I wasn't that interested in, to be honest, because I'd never watched Crossroads, and they weren't actually filming on the day I saw the set. I just was shown the reception set of Crossroads, which was, for your younger viewers, was a very popular soap in its day.
It's amazing to see how these sets are all held together around the back, isn't it, sometimes?
Yeah, exactly. And there was a sci-fi... I was a big Jerry Anderson fan. I loved Thunderbirds, I loved Stingray, I loved Captain Scarlet, all the old Jerry Anderson. But there was a live action... Well, it had models in it, of submarines and stuff, but there was actors in it, and it was called UFO. I don't know if you remember UFO.
Yes.
And I was taken on the set of that to meet... I met Ed Bishop and Gabrielle Drake, who was one of the women with the pink wigs, if you've ever seen UFO.
Yeah.
And saw that. And I was taken to Elstree, because ATV had Elstree at that time. And on one occasion, my dad took me down to Elstree, where I watched The Golden Shot with Bob Monkhouse.
Oh,
and,
the best.
That went out live, believe it or not.
We used to love that on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, Bob Monkhouse, Golden Shot with Bernie the Bolt.
Yeah.
And it was live because they often got viewers to call in and direct Bernie the Bolt, who was blindfolded, to shoot these. Probably wouldn't be allowed today with health and safety, probably, but I mean,
I think
they used to direct him.
I think that's why that one hasn't come back. I really believe that because of health and safety. Because this bolt, occasionally, I don't know if it was
it missed the target, didn't it?
Well, not only that, I seem to remember once it went flying across the audience.
Oh, right.
Absolutely. I remember that once. This thing suddenly flew out and went flying either near or across the audience.
Oh,
One of the two. Yeah. I think that might have been with... Who was the... was it Lenny? Not Lenny. Oh, God. Bob Monkhouse...
Ann Aston was the...
Ann Aston. Who were the other host? Norman
Vaughan, wasn't it?
Norman Vaughan. No, not him. The other one.
I know who you mean, but I can't remember his name.
I don't think he died, Reese. He was a comedian.
Yeah, I know exactly who you mean.
Can't remember.
I just can't remember.
Not to worry,
But
anyway.
It was Bob Monkhouse when I went, anyway.
That's right, yeah.
And it's funny, really, because just to jump ahead quickly, briefly, I met Bob again when I was working in Light Entertainment at the BBC. When he was doing... he did a couple of shows. He did Bob Says Opportunity Knocks, which our crew did. And our crew also did Bob's Full House.
I love that.
Bingo on the TV.
Loved it.
And Bob, it's funny because I met Bob. I think Bob's Full House was first. I met him before Opportunity Knocked. And I mentioned to him I'd met him when I was 7 or 8 years old. He said, "Stop! You're making me feel so old." It was quite a funny moment. But anyway, that's how I got into it, really, because my dad showing me. My dad wasn't technical at all. He didn't have an engineering job. He was a press officer for ATV. Right. So but he got me into it. I applied when in 1979 they had a kind of apprentice scheme. I'd just done my O-levels, and the BBC were looking for people with a minimum of 4 O-levels, which had to include maths and physics. Luckily for me, I was good at maths and physics. That was the kind of subjects I liked. But I didn't get in 79, and what I thought I'd do is stay on school for 1 year, get some more O-levels, because the 4 O-levels was the minimum, and I did get 4 O-levels in 79. But I thought if I can get some more O-levels, that might, improve my chances a bit. So I managed to get another few O-levels and ended up with 7 O-levels in the end. So when I reapplied in 1980 for the same scheme, what they were doing is they advertised for people who wanted to be cameramen, lighting people, sound people, and you just applied for this apprentice scheme. They would train you up, and it was a 3-year training scheme. And luckily I got in 1980. They accepted me. That was in August of 80, so I officially joined in September of 1980. And then you began your 3-year training course. And I joined Light Entertainment Group. Sorry, I should have said that. TV Sound Light Entertainment Group. And Light Entertainment Group did quiz shows, music shows, sitcoms, all that kind of stuff. But within the Light Entertainment Group, they kind of split it. So one half of the Light Entertainment Group kind of concentrated on the sitcoms, and the other half of the group tended to concentrate on the music shows, variety shows, quiz shows. And I was on that half of the group.
Right.
I did work on a couple of sitcoms, because sometimes if they were desperate for staff, we got moved around a bit. But
What sitcoms did you work on?
I did a few episodes of Heidi High.
Oh, yeah, I met Sue Pollard, yeah.
I did a couple of episodes of Only Fools and Horses.
Right.
And I did a few episodes of... Oh, the name's got straight out of my head. Oh, heavens above.
Not Dad's Army?
No, Dad's Army...
That's before you, isn't it?
Yeah, it was before me. It would come to me in a minute.
Keeping Up
But
Appearances?
I did do a few comedies, but most of it was the... Sorry, with Ronnie Corbett.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, great programme.
And of course I'd done worked with Ronnie Corbett because I did the final series of the 2 Ronnies in 1981.
Yeah. Wow.
But I was very junior at this time, so I wasn't actually mixing the sound. Oh, I haven't really completed telling you about what the job entailed, did I? So let me just quickly finish that first. So I joined, 3 years training. Once you've done your 3 years training, as long as you qualified after 3 years, there was a course called a Q course, standing for qualifying. And if you passed that, where they tested your knowledge and made sure you'd learnt everything that you're meant to have learnt over those 3 years, if you passed that, you got the job. If you didn't pass it, they either tried to relocate you into another job in the BBC, like a clerical job or something, or that was it. You're out the door. You didn't have any comeback.
Oh, really?
And no comeback at all. But they did try and relocate you if they could. But
okay.
That was it. But luckily for me, I passed my Q course. So
yeah,
then I spent...
in those days, when you work for a firm, whether it be BBC, British Telecom, whoever, you tended to transfer around. If you weren't good at something, they'd try you at something else.
That's right.
And
yeah.
I think these
days...
days...
I had no interest in being a clerk. I mean, I wanted to work in sound. That's what I ever dreamed of doing.
Right.
And, so luckily for me, I qualified. And then up until 1989, I worked in TV Light Entertainment. And as I say, I was on the half of the group that did the kind of quiz shows and the variety and music shows. And the thing with TV Light Entertainment was that it was a crew system. So you joined a crew, and there's about 6 or 7 of you on a crew. And you had the sound supervisor, who was the head of the crew, and he, or she, but mainly he back in those days, there wasn't many women in there, to be honest, would mix the programs when it came to the final recording or final live transmission. It was the sound supervisor. He had his name on the credits, so he wasn't too eager to let someone else mix it for him. So he would normally mix it. There was an assistant sound supervisor, and then there was the rest of us on the sound crew. So the rest of the sound crew would rig the studio for the sound, set the mics up, do the testing. Maybe we get to play some music in if it's a show that needs music played in or sound effects played in, like a lot of the music shows, the artists would what we call lip sync. So they
Like
wouldn't
Top of the
sing the
Pops.
song. Yeah, I mean, our crew didn't do Top of the Pops, bizarrely.
Oh, right. Yeah.
There was two crews that did who did the music shows and the quiz shows, and the crew I was on was the crew that didn't do Top of the Pops.
Oh,
But,
okay.
so I can't really tell you about Top of the Pops itself, but it was the same principle, yeah.
Did
So,
you do George Hamilton IV, country music at the television
our
theatre?
crew
That
didn't do
wasn't
that.
you. Okay.
no.
Just wondered.
But I did whistle tests,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and I did all kinds of variety shows. Les Dawson show, which featured quite a lot of music in his comedy show. So
I
we
like
did
the piano
that.
playing.
We did Wogan,
Right. Yeah.
you know, the talk show. We did Wogan, because we did speech shows as well, but as long as they were light entertainment.
Parkinson.
Parkinson, no, didn't do that, our crew. And quiz shows, we did things like Every Second Count.
Oh, I love the music to that. I tried to get the
Blankety-
music to that.
Blankety Blank,
Yeah.
Alas Smith and Jones, Larry Grayson's Generation
Oh,
Game.
fantastic.
Bruce had left by the time I joined. He'd gone to ITV. But Larry Grayson and Ida Sinclair, Generation, they were lovely people. They're very nice people. We loved doing the Generation Game. And, they're the kind of shows I worked on. But as I say, being a crew-based system, I didn't really get to the actual mixing much because the sound supervisors tended to stay for years and years and years, and until they went, you couldn't really get much chance to doing the mixing. They would sometimes let you do the mixing during the rehearsals,
Yeah.
you know, which before the recordings or live transmission, you sometimes got your hand in there. But it was only kind of the final year in light entertainment in '88 that I got the job of assistant sound supervisor, and then I did get to mix a bit. But even then, the sound supervisor tended to hog most of the mixing.
Just for those people that don't know, what do you mean by mixing?
Well, sitting at like in a sound mixer, basically. You've got a mixing desk, and they would fade the mics up and down, and they would,
So all the sound comes into this gadget, and you mix it all together so that it sounds nice for people at the other end.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit like being you've probably seen it in radio as well, where there's a presenter fading up their own mics and stuff. It's a much bigger mixer, but basically the same principle.
Yeah.
They would fade up. Anything you were going to hear on the programme went through their mixing desk, and it was their job to make sure it was balanced, so you didn't suddenly get a much louder bit of music suddenly come in the middle of the programme, and make sure that if the sound quality of the bit of audio isn't great, they would what we call EQ it, which is basically bass, treble, mid frequencies you could adjust, and maybe put it through a compressor or an expander. I don't want to get too technical because I know it's boring for people, but just to improve the sound, basically. That's the bottom line. So they were to make it sound as good as they possibly could, and that was their job, and they got their name on the credit. The rest of the sound crew, we were on the credits. We never got our name on the credit. I never once got my name on the credit. Even when I did mix a program in that 1988 year, when I was the assistant sound supervisor, I did get to mix a couple of programs, and it was still the sound supervisor's name who went up on the credit.
How disappointing! Please don't tell me you sat there that night knowing that you'd worked on this program, waiting for your name to come up, and it didn't.
Well, I knew my name wouldn't come up because it's the policy that the sound supervisor was always the name that went up.
Yeah.
And so I did that to 1989. We can talk about it a bit more if you want in a minute, but let me just tell you exactly what else I did. 1989, I was just getting a bit bored, really, to be honest. And I fancied doing some radio. I always loved radio growing up. And I wanted to do some radio, and I had no opportunity to do that in TV light entertainment. BBC News decided they were going to do a bi-media department. So their sound people would work in both TV and radio. And that appealed to me greatly. So I applied to join that in 1989, and I was taken on. So after some brief training in radio, and it wasn't, the desks, the mixing equipment and everything wasn't that much different from TV. So it was only about 4-week training or something just to get us, accustomed to the new way of working. Then I began my career in BBC News, and that involved mixing like the 6 o'clock news, the 10 o'clock news on BBC One, Radio 4 news programs like Today programme, World at 1 p.m, Watto, World at 1, Watto, World Tonight, all the news content, and current affairs content like File on 4 and stuff like that. And then when Radio 5 came along in the 90s, 5 Live, that is, not the original.
Was it the 90s? Is that how long it's been around?
Yeah, 5 Live started in the 90s.
Gosh.
And when that started, obviously we worked on all those programmes because they were all news and sport programmes. So we worked on all those programmes, Drive Time, Peter Allen, Jane Garvey, which I love doing because I love Peter so much. Such a nice guy. And we worked on all the 5 Live programmes until 5 Live moved to Manchester in, was it 2010, 2011? I can't remember. It was somewhere around there.
Was it more difficult or just the same working either with sound in radio or television?
Well, it's a bit of a different way of working because the thing with TV is you're just kind of a cog in a big wheel. Because as I say, I was part of a crew, and then there's cameramen, there's lighting people, there's, it's quite a big team who do a TV show. While in radio, it's much more intimate. It's you, whoever's presenting or guests, and there's the producer, maybe a program editor, like on the Today program, you have a senior editor in as well. So there's only about 2 or 3 of you, and you're actually looking at your presenter through the glass. They can see you, and I've done TV shows where I've spent a week working on a program with a certain person, and they've got no idea what I look like because I'm just part of in the background really of the team of people milling around on the studio floor. But if you work in radio, it's much more intimate and much more friendly in a way because what tended to happen was presenters, you would go like to the canteen with them and you would sit at the same table and chat with them. And
Terry Wogan often talked about that on his Radio 2 show.
Yeah. Obviously I didn't work with Wogan on the radio because that's a separate group. I was working in news. Yeah. But I worked with Wogan on Wogan as a talk show. Yeah. But of course, there wasn't any chance to, we didn't mingle. We didn't go to the green room. That was for the artists, the talent, as they call them. Yeah. And the crew weren't invited to the green room. I don't think it's not Terry's fault. It's just the way it was. The talent, we were the oily rags. And,
I get the impression that people mixed more from sort of the star world and the technical side than the what I call Z-list celebrities of today.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case, Chris. Yeah. And as I say, in general, I had a much closer working relationship with the presenters in BBC News, Hugh Edwards, all those kind of people, because you were literally, they knew, you were sitting opposite them near enough, and you had a much closer working relationship. But having said that, I'd like to quickly tell you, and I mentioned we had a quick chat, didn't we, Chris, before I actually came on air. Yes. You spoke to me a few days ago, and I have to mention a celebrity who changed my life really. Okay. And this was when there was light entertainment, and I'd only just started. I'd done my 3-month training, and that took me to the end of 1980. And then from 1981, January 1981 onwards, up until the 3rd year mark, I was doing on-the-job training. And I've already told you that kind of involved just watching what was going on, learning how to rig the mics, learning how things were done in TV. But they often did give you the most junior job, which I hated so much, which was called Sound Floor Co-ord. And what this was once everything was sorted and rigged, what would happen, unless it was a big show where more than one of us would remain on the studio floor, the rest of the sound crew would go back up to the sound gallery and leave one person on the studio floor as a liaison. So if the sound supervisor wanted a mic moved or something, he could call down to me on my radio talkback, and I would dash in and adjust the microphone, and vice versa. If, say, an actor or a singer had a question like they wanted more foldback being those speakers you often see at the beginning, at the edge of stages.
Yeah, so that's so
they can hear themselves, you know, and how they're sounding and the musical mix. And they may want that tweaked a bit, so I can feed that back up to the sound supervisor. The guy in charge of the studio floor was actually the floor manager, but he talks to the director, and it was just quicker to have a separate sound person to speak directly to the sound supervisor, because the sound gallery is in a completely different room to where the TV director was.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, back then it wasn't the case towards the end, but back then at TV Centre, before the BBC got rid of it, and that I cried the day TV Centre.
Oh, don't even go there.
All my career, those first 9 years was at TV Centre or the TV Theatre, but TV Centre. All my first 9 years was there, and I had so many memories, including the one I'm about to tell you, from TV Centre, and it devastated me when I got rid of TV Centre. It really did, and you know, it sounds silly to shed a tear for a building, but it did. And
nothing wrong with that, mate.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll get back to the story really, because I was a trainee, and I had this job, which I said I hated, and because I was new and the trainee, I got it so often. Sound floor cohorts, and what you do? You were just to the side of the stage, in line of sight of the actors or singers, so they could beckon you over if they needed something. So, 1981. I'm just trying to think the best way to tell the story, really.
Take your time. There's no rush.
Well, I was so shy, Chris, back in 1980. I joined the BBC, and I was really shy. I found it the hardest part of the job when I first started was dealing with, as I say, the talent. Because I was so shy, and I'm very introverted as well back then, very introverted. And I found it so hard, you know, approaching a celebrity, even to mic them up if they wanted to wear a personal mic, you know, just to get the microphone on them. Often the floor manager had to step in and help me because I was so, you know, a bundle of nerves. I couldn't untangle the microphone, and, you know, if it was a personal microphone, and it was terrible. Anyway, someone who made the lasting impression on me, we were assigned the task of recording 2 songs by the Carpenters, Karen Carpenter, Richard Carpenter, who were over to promote a new album. It turned out to be their final album before Karen sadly died. And we were tasked to do these 2 songs because they were going to be interviewed on, and you probably remember this show, Chris, Multicoloured Swap Shop.
Oh,
with Noel Edmonds and Pete Chegwin and all that
Swap
gang.
Shop.
Exactly. Now, my crew didn't do Swap Shop. It was children's TV, and that was a separate department.
Right.
But because the Swap Shop studio was so small, and they wanted Karen and Richard to sing a couple of songs, they didn't really have the facilities or the space to do it. So they decided to record the 2 songs the day before, which would then be played in when Karen and Richard were answering questions to the children on the phone and whatever. So that's what we were set up to do. Karen had decided she wanted to sing live, no lip-syncing. So that involved a bit of extra work, and we didn't know that until the last minute. We had all the pre-recorded tapes and everything ready to play in for her to lip-sync to, which the agent had apparently led the director to believe was what they were going to do, and she was going to lip-sync it. But apparently when she turned up, she said she didn't want to lip-sync it. She wanted to sing it live, which wasn't a major problem because we had tapes of just the musical backing as well.
Yeah.
So they decided to lip-sync it, and this is for the Swap Shop on the next day. Now, when Richard and Karen came into the studio, everyone could tell how ill Karen was. She was thin, Chris. I've never seen anyone as thin. She was thin, her fragile-looking. I couldn't believe she was doing it, to be honest, because she didn't look too healthy at all. She looked very ill. But before the first run-through, they went round everyone on the studio floor, led by the floor manager. We took them round because they'd asked to be led round, saying hello to the cameras, to the lighting people, seeing anyone who was standing on that studio floor, they came up and shook hands with. And I've never experienced that from an artist before. And he led them across to me because I was one of the last ones to be introduced because he was doing a circuit of the studio and I was by the side of the set. And he said, and this is Mark, any sound problems and questions, he's your man. And they shook hands with me. And Karen said, oh, you're very young. And I admitted, oh, well, I'm new. I've only been doing the job a short time. And she looked aghast. She looked, as if her whole world had ended. And she turned to Richard and said in a kind of diva-ish way, we're not prepared to work with anyone who's only just started, are we? Now, of course, I was brand new. I was, very scared of these people.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if she was serious or not. I didn't know if it was going to be a kind of diva strop or if she was, just stringing me along. But then she turned back with a great big smile on her face and winked at me. And that was fine. Made me love her immediately, really. And she was really nice. So they did the first run-through. What was going to happen was 2 run-throughs, and then we'd do the recordings of the actual songs. And I'll tell you this, Chris, her voice, she might have been ill, but her voice, I mean, I'd never really knew much about the Carpenters. I mean, I'd heard them on the radio growing up, like you probably did, Close to You and Yesterday Once More and all the hits they had. And I've never really paid that much attention to her. But she sang, and her voice was so beautiful, so beautiful. That low note, the contralto voice, the low notes in her contralto voice, it was such a beautiful voice. All the crew commented afterwards, what a beautiful voice he had. Anyway, he does the first run through, and then there's a delay of about 20 minutes while some lighting and camera things are sorted out. Richard pops out the studio to do something. I don't know where he went. Karen came and sat at the end of the set, watching what was going on, and then she beckoned me over with her finger, just her index finger, just beckoned me over. And then
how old were you here? Are you 20, 21?
I was 19, 18, 19.
Oh, okay.
But very, very introverted and very shy. Yeah. And she asked me all kinds of questions, my future ambitions, how long I've been doing the job, who I'd met, what I wanted to do in the future, what I got up to outside of work. She spent near enough that whole 15, 20 minutes just talking to me. And the thing was, when I answered, she looked like she was really paying attention to what I was saying. And I loved her so much for that. And she was so sweet, so nice. It made such a big impression on me at that age. And once they recorded their 2 songs, again, give Richard as well, him too, they came round and shook all our hands again at the end, thanking us for being there and doing it. And we were being paid to do it. I mean, they still came around and thanked us for doing it. And that is why I'm such a big Karen Carpenter fan. She was so sweet. And, of course, it was only under 2 years later that she died after that meeting. And I was so sad when she died, just 32 years of age. And she died. And I was so sad at that because she was such a sweet person. And no other celebrity ever did that, come down to the studio floor, meet everyone individually. They'd sometimes say thank you from the stage. Yeah. But they would never come around and shake everybody's hand, and they did that. Right. And that made a big impression on me. I wanted to tell that story because to this day, whenever I hear a Karen Carpenter song or see a video of her on YouTube, it takes me instantly back to that day, and a bittersweet memory.
Did you ever see her or speak to her again after that?
No, that was the only time. I think she passed away 2 years after that. Never saw her again, but it's the one and only. But it made that big an impression on me.
How wonderful!
Yeah, so I wanted to tell that story.
Yeah,
that's as I say, I'm happy now to talk about any. I got that off my chest. I'm happy to talk about anything else. Oh, the other thing I used to do was radio cars. Now,
radio.
If,
yeah.
If you listen to Radio 4, you may have in the last few years. You probably know they sometimes say, like on the Today programme, they say, "I'm talking to us from our radio car." Is Mr. Prescott or somebody, And what we used to do is we had 5 transit vans, so they weren't really cars at all. They were vans, and we used to go out, and what they could do is interview. It was mainly politicians being news, but we sometimes did celebrities. We sometimes covered press conferences, and we could feed it back in studio quality. So it's as if that person is in the studio, apart from a bit of road noise often. But and I did that as well for many years, and I quite enjoyed doing that as well. getting out and about.
Was that all broadcast back by satellite, was it? Or landline?
Well, when I started, because I started...
Because there's no mobile phones, was there?
No. I started in the analogue world.
Right.
So the radio cars were what we call our radio frequency. So they fed, like in London, you would transmit from the radio car, and it would be picked up by they had three receivers in London. There was one on Swains Lane, there was one on the roof of Broadcasting House, and there was one at the Crystal Palace transmitter site. And whichever site you were nearest to was the one that picked up the sound.
That was on a radio frequency that we couldn't pick up, yeah?
Oh yeah, it was on a. I mean, if you had a scanner, you probably could have picked it up, but it was on a UHF frequency.
Okay.
And then to hear back, at first we didn't have any mobile phones. So at first it was a check receiver, so they would literally be listening to the radio back, just to hear, the questions being asked. So in real time, so you're listening to FM, hearing the question from John Humphreys or whoever's presenting the Today programme, and they would answer.
Right.
Later, when mobile phones came along, we used phone queue. So you'd dial in on the phone, and then you'd hear the programme coming back down the mobile phone. But they still hear you in quality on the radio link. And then later, when satellites came along, the radio cars were fitted with both the original transmitters and satellite. So you could line up to the satellite and feed and connect via the satellite back to the studio. So we had different means of doing it. But the technology changed so much, Chris, over the years.
Yeah.
Because by the time I'd gone, it's all computer-based now. Everything, all the reports you see, all the shows you see played in on BBC One and BBC Two, they all come off a computer server. Nothing's on tape or on any kind of other medium now. It's all computer-based, which means when it goes wrong, basically. And so that's it really. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, well, great, Mark. There's a few coming. Let's see what we got here. First of all, I must just thank someone for sending in a super chat. That is Remy. Thank you very much for sending a little tip this evening. Remy sent me a couple of quid, which is sometimes people do that. Do you know the tip thing? Do you?
Yes.
Yeah, a couple of quid here, a couple of quid there. It's always very nice for people to do that. Let's have a little look at the text there. Hello to Diane Jeb. Danny Drayton from Engage Radio. I was talking to him earlier because I'm hoping to do my little radio show on TikTok.
Oh, yes.
As well as Reach on Air. Because you do a show on Reach on Air, don't you? When is that?
I'm glad you mentioned that, Chris. Sunday afternoons, 2 till 5, and I do a Wednesday night, 11 p.m. to midnight.
Yeah, and Danny was mentioning earlier that you spent a lot of money on jingles and things. Am I right?
I did. I'm a big fan of Pam's jingles, which used to do the BBC jingles in the 60s and 70s.
Oh, God,
And I've got some made up for me, and I'm a massive jingle fan. There's another Reach presenter, or ex-Reach presenter, called Alan Ross, who's also into his jingles.
We love jingles and things. We love them. We love them. And there's some, you've probably seen them on YouTube, and they show you the orchestra making the BBC Radio 2 jingles.
I have seen that. Yes, I've seen that.
Da 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 da.
Anyway, that was the last lot of Radio 2 jingles, wasn't it? Wasn't the current ones, was it? So,
wonderful stuff. We got a message, so a question from Danny here, who says, "Good evening, Chris. I have a question for Mark. What's the best thing he's taken? What's the best thing he's taken from his time at the BBC? Would that be Karen Carpenter?"
Well, that's one of the things, definitely. But best thing, that's
perhaps highlights of whatever you did there, and maybe there's, wow, that was one of the best things I ever did there, that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, I've told the Karen Carpenter story. She made a big impression on me, but I wouldn't say the actual music video was the best thing I ever did. But I think it's when I was working when big news events happened. Like I was doing 5 Live Drive on the day of the Twin Towers. So that was a big breaking news story. And when you're doing a live radio show, with a news radio show with a big breaking news story, it's mayhem. But the adrenaline kicks in.
Yeah.
And if it goes well, you feel so proud afterwards of doing a good job. So Twin Towers, the night Michael Jackson died.
Oh,
doing
yeah.
the late night Five Live show that night. The big news, and general elections, of course. We worked on general election shows as well. So when they go well, and you think you've done a good job, you do get a good feeling. And we used to get if it did go well, we used to get what we call herograms, where the producer of the program would write to our managers and say, "Oh, I think Mark did a good job on that show. You know, can you tell him he did a good job?" We didn't get any bonus for that, but
No.
But,
You got paid for your job. That was it.
Yeah. Doing those shows that something in history, and I think they're the ones that stand out really. But there's so many great moments. I mean, I feel very privileged, Chris, to have done this job for so many years. There's people, who desperately want to work in the industry. Having said that, it's not all the glamour and, excitement that people may think it is. The hours are very long. Our shifts were 11 to 12 hours. You had to work early, you did late, you did night.
You got to stay there till it's finished, haven't you?
Yeah, you work Christmas Day sometimes. You didn't always get Christmas off. It's a very unsociable job, really, because I tended to do mainly the late because I'm a naturally late person. And I found it easier than getting up at 3 a.m. to do an early shift. So I tended to do the late, but then that's hard on your loved ones.
Yes.
Because you're not available to go out, and particularly when you're younger, it matters so much when you get older and your other half doesn't want to go out anyway.
I was going to say, how did the wife put up with you all these years?
It wasn't wife, we lived together, but my first Penny, my first girlfriend, who I lived with for many years, 7 or 8 years, didn't put up with it. Well, she left. But luckily I met a lovely girl called Katie, who's now my wife, and we've been married for over 25 years. And she put up with it, God bless her. And even though she's Canadian. But,
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
was it the Canadian Prime Minister dancing or something? Was it him or the New Zealand? I don't know. But something
Are you
about.
talking about recently, or are you talking about a time? Oh no, I didn't see that.
Yeah, was it? I can't remember. Was it something to do with the Queen's funeral? Afterwards or something.
It's dancing at the Queen's funeral.
No. I think it was afterwards. I don't know. Some story I heard. What was the? I'm dying to know. What was the song that the songs that the Carpenters sung on that particular?
On the two songs they sang.
Please,
for
yes.
Prop Shop.
Yes.
Yeah. They did one old song and one new one, and they were over to promote an album called Made in America.
Right.
As I say, it's going to be their last. It turned out to be their last studio album. And the song they sang from that was Those Good Old Dreams.
Right, don't know that
and
one.
the old song she sang was A Song for You. And you can see A Song for You if you do a search on YouTube. There's
How's
many
that go?
examples of her performing that.
I don't know that one either.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful song.
Right,
and
okay.
She sang it so well. And so they're the two songs they did.
Right. But Maureen sings. Maureen, who does the karaoke, she sings a couple of Carpenters. I think she sings one of the Carpenters songs, "Top of the World" or something like that.
Oh, "Top of the World," very popular song.
I'm on the top of the world. Fran Green, good evening, Fran. Says it was Lenny Bennett. No, it wasn't Lenny Bennett. We're talking about the golden shot. I've got him now. There he is. Ray Reynolds is there. Charlie Williams.
Ah, yes.
Charlie Williams.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that's the one, because he didn't stick there very long at the Golden Shot, did he?
No, he didn't.
He wasn't. Mind you, none of them were. It was only Bob Monkhouse who stayed there a long time.
Oh, Bob was a lovely guy. As I say, I work with him on Bob Said's Opportunity Knocks.
Yeah, I know. I know someone, another person, something to do with television, who got into money troubles, and out of the blue, he got a big cheque from Bob Monkhouse through the post, completely out of the blue.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
He was a lovely guy. Jasper Carrot, we did Saturday Night Carrot. I think something I mentioned that. He was a nice guy as well.
Right.
To be honest, Chris, I have to say, most of the people we worked with presenters, actors, singers were nice people. It's just, there's just one or two real standout nice people, like I mentioned Karen, and there were one or two of the opposite end of the spectrum.
Do you want to tell us or not?
We're not supposed to, even after I've left. But I'll tell you what I can
don't
do.
then. Don't then.
If I tell you, Chris, programs I didn't particularly like doing.
Okay.
Then you can draw your own conclusions
Go
to
on,
why
what
I didn't like doing the
programs?
And I can tell you that I didn't particularly enjoy programs that just happened to involve Jim Davidson.
Yeah.
I didn't particularly enjoy programs that happened to have Nicky Campbell on.
Right.
And I didn't particularly enjoy programs with Victoria Derbyshire either.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah.
I'm not saying it was them, Chris.
No,
I'm just saying, I
absolutely
just
not.
didn't enjoy those
Absolutely not.
programs.
She's worked with loads of people. It could be anyone.
It could be anyone.
The whole Five Live.
But as I say, the majority were really nice.
Most of them were all right.
We had guest artists on who were, just complete and utter up themselves and, full of their own self-importance. And you just, I was very nervous at the start of my career. But once I've been in the job a couple of years, you just let it go. We weren't allowed to answer them back. We were told that if someone had a go at us, we could complain to the director about it. But we weren't allowed to answer these people back. And that was it. And after a year or two, you just let it wash over you. You just didn't take it personally.
Right.
Because if you did, you wouldn't do the job.
As a matter of interest.
It's particularly in news. It's a stressful job.
Yeah,
and
I should imagine.
If a presenter loses their temper, and as I say, we were sitting opposite them in the sound control room, and they would get on the talkback and vent their anger or something. Say something didn't work right, and we faded up a outside source. When I say outside source, that means anything that wasn't in the studio, so you could have a correspondent.
Well, have you ever watched GB News?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So there were certain presenters that if things didn't go right, they immediately had to go at you. It wasn't always. Sometimes we might have made a mistake and not put the right fader up.
Oh, I'm sure you didn't. I'm sure you didn't.
Often it was just the circuit itself had failed or something.
Right.
And you just put up with it in the end. And quite often, these presenters, once they calmed down, would apologise to you anyway. And and you just let it go. Didn't make it right. I don't believe in bullying in any way, shape, or form.
Did you work with any of these sort of? And I don't want to go into what they'd done or what they didn't do. Any of these? Well, there's 3 of them. Four of them actually. Dodgy characters, shall we say?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
There's 4 of them.
Luckily for me, my crew didn't do the shows that these characters were involved in.
Right. Okay.
Of course, I didn't see them walking about in TV Centre, because I did. But I didn't actually work with them, although, of course, I did have colleagues who were on the crews who did work with them.
Yeah.
And, most of the crew people didn't really know what was going on.
No, neither did the
viewers. People say it must have been obvious. But, how can it be obvious? Unless you're
looking for it. Yeah.
On one particular, I don't want to get too heavy in this.
No, don't.
In one particular person we're talking about, and it's alleged that they, did something with people in their dressing room. But we didn't go in their dressing rooms.
No, of course you didn't.
We weren't invited in. We didn't see what went on behind.
No, we weren't in
as much as you did.
You weren't invited in the cafe with them, were you? Whoa.
No, exactly. So we didn't know what was going on. I'm not saying that some of the management may have known. I don't know if they did or not. I'm not saying they did. But definitely on the crew side, definitely on our level, we didn't know what was going on. We didn't witness anything.
Interesting.
And if we had, we would have reported it.
Yeah.
It was a slightly different, not on the scale of what we're talking about, but back when I first started, it was quite common for presenters or the talent, like if there was a floor manager, and especially like a female floor manager, they would, give the actor or artist an instruction. They say, "Oh, okay, love," and they would pat her on the backside. Of course,
that was normal then, though.
That was normal back in the early 80s.
In all walks of life, that was completely normal.
I'm not saying that's right.
No.
I'm saying that was what was going on.
That's right. Yeah.
In all walks of life back then, and but I never witnessed anything of a major scale.
Do you know, Mark? I've got to tell you, I walk around here at night hoping for someone to pat me on the arse, but it doesn't happen.
You're not the only one, mate. I mean, I'm the same age as you. In fact, I'm older than you. I'm 60 in December. I mean, I'm much older than you. So yeah.
I'm just going to pop into the chat box here to see if I can.
Yeah, while you're doing that, I could
pick out any questions
you
for
have a quick look at
you.
your messages, and then
It's difficult sometimes when everyone's talking to each other.
Like I think I was going to mention was about like tape editing, which we used to do in BBC News when it was on
Razor
for
blade.
radio. It was on quarter-inch reels of tape.
Yeah.
And what you had to do was you had a Chinograph pencil.
Right.
And to edit. And you had to do this really fast because the reports came in from correspondents about 5 minutes before they were due on the air.
Right.
And so they were filed through an area called News Traffic, which had people who would answer the correspondence dialing in, take their reports in, remotely fire tape machines off in a different area, and it was our job to go in and take the reports off the tape machine and then splice them together. You know, take out any mistakes the correspondents made when they were talking. They'd be talking and they'd say, "Oh, I've made a mistake." They overlap, they used to say, and they'd start again, and we used to have to cut that out.
Was that with a razor blade?
Yeah, with a Chinograph first to mark the place.
Yeah.
And then a razor blade. You know, just a razor blade on its own.
Yeah.
And we used to splice it down, and it wouldn't be allowed today, I don't think, because all those when you fast forwarded or fast rewound those tape machines, if you left the razor blade on top of the spool, it could fly across the room.
Oh yes, I would imagine it would. Yeah.
Decapitate somebody. I don't think it'd be allowed. I don't think it'd be allowed today.
Did you ever try and edit a cassette tape?
I never had to edit a cassette tape.
It was awful. Especially the C120s, and you'd cut this thing, pull a bit out, and the ends would curl up. You couldn't get the damn thing. It must have been a lot easier with the quarter-inch tape things.
Well, it was easier, but I mean, as I say, it was still stressful because you were up against a deadline, and things could go wrong. I remember because a lot of the reports were played in off quarter-inch tape in the early days. And we used to have these tape machines in the radio studios. At the back of the studios, there'd be two technical people in those days. You'd have someone at the mixing desk doing the mixing, and then the second technical person at the back putting the tapes on the tape machines. You'd have 3 or 4 tape machines, lacing the tape up, playing them in, and then taking them off and putting the next report on. And on the busy show, you'd have lots of tapes. You'd have like about 30 spools of tape. So you had a big rack, so you could put them in order. To keep track of what you're going to play. And on one occasion, I had them all stacked up. This is, again, quite early. I just joined BBC News, so about 1990, I think it was. And I had all these tapes for I think it was the 6 o'clock Radio 4 News, but I had all these tapes stacked up. And the thing collapsed. The whole thing collapsed. We're live on there. The whole thing collapsed. The tapes go spinning around the floor, all mixed up. I've got no idea. Of course, we have labelled the tapes, but you've got to track down. And of course, the presenter's queuing the next tape. I'm on the floor, my hands and knees, out with the producer as well, trying to help, trying to find the tape that's due on next. And of course, you can't find it in time. They're all kind of, not only have they fallen on the floor, they've all kind of, spun around, and all the tapes come out.
I was going to say, did they tangle up?
Yeah, so tangled up. So the old presenter said, "This report from Fergal Keane." Silence. Oh, we haven't got that report. And then they did the next one. This report by Bridget Kendall. And because I'm still on the floor trying to find the blimmin' tapes. And
well, at least it was an accident. I was doing a show on Liberty Radio in London, 1999 to 2. Was on about just over about 18 months. I was on there doing overnight. The boy before me, he was a bit of a lad. His name was Matt Foister, and him and me, and he worked with a bloke called Adam as well. He did some stuff as well, and we all got on really well. and I would go 2 till 6:30. He'd be on till 2 in the morning. And I'm in there, and we were on CDs. Okay? So while he's on, I go in the CD room and start pulling out all my CDs that are on the list to play, because we were told what songs to play. And I'm gradually stacking up all these CDs. I brought them into the studio. That's the first hour. That's the second hour. That's the third hour. You wouldn't have all of them because, of course, he'd had some of them in his studio playing them as well. And he just finished, and he put the news on, and then he pushed a button, the offer button. You know the offer button?
Yeah.
To offer me the programme to the other studio. I pressed accept, so I've got the show now, and I'm playing the news. And my first 2 CDs are in there. And Matt came in. You all ready? Yeah, all right, Matt. Nice show, mate. All right, well, we're going to go now. Whoops! And he knocked over, purposely, pushed over a load of my CDs. Now, they only fell over onto the desk, but now, of course, they're all out of order.
No. What a nightmare.
Well, is that your worst disaster? What was it?
I had a few you can't work for a corporation for 40 years and not have some few disasters.
Yeah.
I had a presenter faint live on air.
Oh, right.
I was doing 5 Live News, and the newsreader was doing their news bulletin, and then after the news you have some sport. Now, often the sport presenter would come down into the same studio where you were, where the newsreader was, because the newsreader came into the main studio. But sometimes, if sport were busy, because they were quite thin, not many staff, and sometimes they were kind of monitoring, like live golf or something up in the sports room, and they would do it remotely from the sports room, and on a lip mic, the old lip mics.
Yes, yeah, the things you hold. Yeah.
I had a lady. I'm in 2 months whether to name her or not. Well, Louise was her first name. I won't give her a surname. And I had her on what we call pre-fade, which is what you hear before you fade the fader up, so the audience listening can't hear, but we can talk to the person and make sure they're happy and ready to go and get some sound level from them. And so I had her on pre-fade. The newsreader's doing his bit, and all I can hear on pre-fade is like that. And I thought, what's going on there? And I got on the talkback to her. I said, are you okay? We're due to come to you in about 1 minute. Are you okay? She said, I'm not feeling very well. I'm not feeling well. I said, don't worry. I'll tell the newsreader not to hand to you. I say, we're not doing the sport. Cancel. No, I must go on. I must go on, she said.
Show must go on.
I said,
I get that.
She said, no. So anyway, the newsreader cues a tape, the last tape before he goes to the sport.
Yeah.
And during this audio insert, I do warn him. I said, look, throw to the sport. She's not feeling well. Just be prepared in case something happens here. So I said, oh, okay. So he does his bit. He hands to sport. I fade them up. There's a brief pause, kind of a Ross Pats out kind of pause. And then there's an almighty bang, crash, bother, like that. A crashing sound. So I quickly faded out. Newsreader picks up. Oh, sorry, we seem to have a technical problem, and we'll go back to sport in a bit. And he queued back to the main program, which was coming from another studio. And I go on the talkback to say, hello. It's silence at first. And then a man comes on the line. He says, oh, do you want me to do the sport? I could do the sport. I said, well, we've moved on now. It's too late. We're not doing the sport now. I said, what happened? She said, oh, Louise, well, she's fainted. I said, well, is she okay? And he said, I don't know, she's on the floor. I said, well, isn't it more important to find her and make sure she's okay? He says, well, I thought the sport was, needed to do the sport. So I said,
he wanted to do it.
You go and find out if she's okay, and we'll do the sport later.
He wanted to do it.
He left her lying on the floor and did the sport, to do the sport. And she'd fainted and fallen like, I can't say she was okay because she's back at work the next day. So,
yes.
But she fainted. What else happened? Another sport one was, this time, it was, sometimes the late night programme came from Manchester.
Right.
This was before 5 Live actually moved to Manchester. So the 5 Live Studios were still in London, but they did a show from Manchester at the weekends from 10 p.m. to midnight. And we were kind of acting as a continuity suite because we were in control of the transmitters and everything. So they would feed the show back down to me in London, and I would just fade it up and feed it back out to the Radio 5 network. And that meant the news and sport came from my studio, while the main programme came from Manchester. So they cue the news and sport. The newsreader, again, does their bit. This time the sport person has actually come into the studio. They're not on a remote line. Sonia, I won't give her surname again, is in. She's halfway through her sport bulletin. She says, "Oh, no, that's wrong," and swears using the F word. This is live on air, on 5 Live. So I shut the mic quickly. I said, you're out live, you're going live, you know, you're live. And she said, and I faded her back up, and she just carried on. She came into the control suite afterwards and said, you know what, I've been doing so many recordings, because they had to do recordings for other outlets, like local radio and all the other outlets. She said, I've been doing so many recordings, I completely forgot I was live.
Yeah.
I thought I was recording.
Yeah, never swear in front of never swear in front of a mic.
Yeah, she said, do you think anyone noticed? I said, I think they probably did notice. And she said, are you going to log it? And we had to log anything that went wrong, both technical and, you know, anything like swearing. I said, look, Sonia, it's gone out on air. I've got to log it because, you know, management could easily be listening. If I don't log it, I'm going to end up, in hot water. I suggest you know, do your own log as well. We had a central thing called Rails log, where presenters and engineers like myself could enter the operational log of why something went wrong or what went wrong. So the management could have a look at it in the morning. And I said, I suggest you do a log and just say, you know, you got confused. But I cannot not log it because it went out. And, you know, if I don't log it, it's going to be me who ends up in a lot of trouble. So she's very understanding. She said, I can see your point. I see why.
Didn't lose her job, did she?
She didn't lose her job. I'm sure she did get a telling off, but she didn't lose her job because she was still doing the sport the next day and the days afterwards. So that happened. I'm just trying to think of any more kind of mildly amusing stories, really. We had a show. I don't know if I mentioned. I worked on the BBC News Channel and BBC World News channels as well, because that's all part of the news sound job. And I was doing the BBC World News channel, which goes out, as it says, around the world. And there was a programme, what was it called? Afternoon programme, doesn't really matter what it's called. John Sopel, who you may have seen or heard of, was the presenter. And I can't remember the reason for this, but they had a guy, a pianist, coming in. Now, again, the TV studio that he was presenting from was a news studio, and they're not that big, and they're definitely not acoustically treated very well. I mean, they're fine for speech, but for music, they're not great, really. And so he was going to play the piano I was in the basement, where the TV studio is. He was going up to the 6th floor of Broadcasting House, where there was a piano room, which was in an acoustic-treated area. And we had the floor manager up there with him to, make sure everything was okay. And he was going to play the piano. He could hear the program in the earpiece, and he could hear his cue to play these bits of music on the piano. As I say, I can't remember why we were doing it, but we were. And John introduces him. He's going to play out the program. The idea was he's going to play this music to the end of the program, and that could be it. So John Sopel throws to this guy, says, now for something I've been waiting for all day. It's whoever his name was. He's going to play us his tune. So the music starts. John Sopel had obviously been waiting all day for it because he got up and left. He left the studio, said, that's me done, I'm out of here. The guy plays the piano, and he finishes. We'd rehearsed it, so we knew the timing, but for some reason, I don't know if he left a bit out or something, it finished about a minute early. So he's finished. We're trying to get continuity, because World TV has a continuity suite run by Red B, and had an announcer. That's what I mean by continuity suite, is there's a separate presentation control, with an announcer.
Like the bloke that used to come up in between the programmes on ITV.
Yeah, they can cut away and they can fill and they can do stuff. Unlike the news channel, which went direct to air, so we didn't have a continuity for the BBC News channel. But for BBC World, there was. So we're trying to get Red B to pick up and just take us early. For some reason, they're not listening to the production talkback. This guy is just sitting there, finishing his music, and the floor manager is trying to get him to
play another song.
Start again. And he's going, pardon? The floor manager's obviously saying to him, carry on. I can't hear you. He's going. So we're still on him. The shot is still on him.
Yeah.
So it's either shooting him or an empty studio. So eventually he got the message after about 30 seconds, and he starts playing the music again, and then we just have to cut away from it at the end, because Red B never did pick up for some reason. So, so we had that happen. There's all kinds of things went wrong, but that's why I liked working on, as opposed to light entertainment, where most of it was pre-recorded. News is mainly live, of course. And I enjoyed the live much more because it was,
Oh yes.
More adrenaline.
There's a spark,
what was
isn't
going to
there?
happen.
There's a spark when you're doing it live.
Yeah,
I've got
exactly.
a question here from Dan Woodhouse. I don't know if you'll know this one. Dan Woodhouse says, why are programmes these days 45 minutes or an hour compared to the standard half hour in the old days?
Is that completely true?
I don't think it is.
We had programs of 40, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
In my time, back in the 80s. There might be more of them these days. I don't think it can be a real reason. I'm just, as I say, I'm an engineer. I'm not a TV scheduler. But we did have 40, 45-minute programs back in the day.
I mean, I must say I hadn't noticed it really. I mean, I noticed the fact that Doctor Who is an hour long and not half hour split into 6 episodes for one story. So the more recent Doctor Who's, they have this story running through the whole. I don't know if you watch Doctor Who, do you?
I haven't watched it for a few years now.
No, it tends to be one story running through the whole series, and half the time I can't remember what's going on anymore. I think that sort of thing has become more complicated.
Yeah, I was never a massive Doctor Who fan. I always had a soft spot for the Daleks. Who didn't as a kid?
Yes.
As a kid, the Daleks.
Oh, gotcha.
But I've never been a massive Doctor Who fan.
Yeah.
But the answer to the question is, I don't think it's new.
Thank you.
The 40, 45-minute thing. I think it did happen back in the day. And as I say, the 2 Ronnies, I think when I only did the last series of the 2 Ronnies.
Yeah.
But I think that was 50 minutes on BBC Two. I don't think it wasn't half an hour.
The 2 Ronnies they were fantastic. You know,
they were really. Ronnie Barker was really nice.
Yes.
Always said hello and how are you. Ronnie Corbett kept himself to himself a bit, but he wasn't nasty.
No.
He was okay.
Talking of the 2 Ronnies, I've got an idea because I think I'm going to probably be staying home this Christmas, and some of the telly on at Christmas is just normal. Where are all these Christmas specials that we used to have? They're just not there. They still shove on blooming Coronation Street, EastEnders. Where are the Christmas specials of all the things? So I've got this idea this year of collecting together, either on YouTube or on the DVD or something like that, some of the old programmes and watching them at roughly the time they would have been on, such as the 2 Ronnies, Morecambe and Wise, Generation Game, Christmas editions of, I don't know, Every Second Counts. There's one of those. There's a couple of those on there.
Well, of course, Morecambe and Wise was the big thing for when we were growing up, Chris, wasn't it? Morecambe and Wise was the big show for Christmas Day.
Oh, God. There's this bloke on the radio. He's on LBC. He's on at the weekends. I mean, he's just... I very rarely listen to him anymore because he gets obsessed with, well, it used to be Brexit and Trump. Now he's obsessed with the government and what they do wrong, right? And I always remember listening to him once, and he said, I don't understand what was funny about Morecambe and Wise. And I'm thinking, are you actually a real human being? Or do you just not understand humour at all?
Yeah, they were master a master at the craft of the double act.
Yeah,
weren't
the
they?
timing and everything was fantastic.
I mean,
wasn't
that's
it?
my biggest regret. They'd gone by the time I joined the BBC. I would love to have worked on Morecambe and Wise. And it was my crew that worked on Morecambe and Wise, because they used to tell me about it.
Wow.
And they were lovely guys, apparently. And I missed out by... They left the BBC in 77, I think, to go to Thames. And I missed out by 3 years. I had a chance to have worked with Morecambe and Wise. And
I can't remember if that worked for them or not, because a lot of the time these stars would be tempted by the old Wonga.
Well, I don't think it worked. Well, partly I think because Eric Morecambe's health declined pretty quickly, didn't it, at that time?
I mean, it didn't work for Brucey at first when he jumped to LWT, did it?
No,
that went
they
badly
were
wrong.
by the money,
wrong.
weren't they?
Terribly wrong. And of course, Larry came in. I think Larry Grayson ended up with more viewers than Bruce did on Generation Game, didn't he?
I have to say, Larry was a nice guy, and we loved doing the Generation Game.
Yeah.
That was good fun. And as I say, I can't really complain about most of the people we work with, who are all very pleasant and very nice to work with. And no, I mean, you always get. I mean, in every walk of life, you would get horrible people.
Oh,
no matter what job you do, there's always going to be somebody who's not very pleasant.
Of course.
You get that in the entertainment industry, and probably more so. I think there's more kind of diva behaviour now than there was.
You've only got to look at the telly and you know who's the divas and who isn't.
I mean,
and it's not just the girls. It's not just.
I mean, I've talked about the music shows I did in Night Entertainment, and I've talked about Karen Carpenter, but there's people like, who else did I work with? Randy Crawford, people like that. Never, things went wrong in the recording or something. They didn't have a tantrum. They didn't start shouting.
They just got on with it. They just got on with
it. We had groups in like ABC. Who else did we have on? Duran Duran. On Whistle Test, we had people like Joni Mitchell. Who else did we have on Whistle Test? We had a few on Whistle Test. My mind's gone completely blank all of a sudden. But Kate Bush. Was on Whistle Test. Paul Young. They were all, no tantrums. I mean, if things went wrong,
they just got on with it.
They just got on with it. And but today, I know it was going on because when I joined News, I stayed in contact with a lot of people who still worked in Night Entertainment, and they were telling me some of the stories that they have, about people having tantrums and stuff. And so I know it's a bit different today, and I'm pretty glad. I'm glad I worked there at the time I did, Chris.
Yes.
And I'm glad I'm not there now, to be honest. I'm glad I got out. I got out when I did.
Yeah, it's people in general, though, isn't it?
Even the last few years of my job in news, it wasn't the job I joined. Yeah. It was a different climate. The management were different. We didn't feel as valued as we had done.
Yes.
We felt undervalued. It was all kind of, how much does this cost to do? How much does that cost to do?
The accountants have taken over.
And for radio, what annoyed me the most was they seemed more concerned about the webcams, about streaming the studios. They said, that camera didn't look too good on the webcam. I said, well, what do you think about the sound? Oh, no, that's the camera, though. The camera wasn't very good. We're in radio. The sound's the things that matters.
Yeah.
The fact that the webcam is streaming slightly out of frame or something, we couldn't just get up and correct the camera position because we're mixing the program.
No,
not at all. If we could just get up halfway through a program and reposition the camera, we couldn't do it.
It's crazy,
it's not possible to do. So there you go. They seem more concerned about what it looked like on the. Yeah. They see that's the way forward. I think they think radio's dying, and sadly.
Well, I was going to say to you, how many people do you think listen to Radio 5 Live? Because I must admit, I don't know anyone that listens. And now and again, I'll put it on the way home.
Well, Chris, I'll tell you this. I will tell you this.
Yeah.
Well, for a start, it's not helped by the fact it's on medium wave.
Right.
For a start, it's not on FM, is it? So
no.
I know it's on DAB these days, but for many years you could only hear it on medium wave.
Yes.
So that didn't help it for a start, because many areas the reception of 5 Live is pretty bad. And we used to get we could see the latest listening figures that were published. We had access to that.
Right.
And we could see, particularly the last, I would say, from about 2012, 2013, for 5 Live, there was a slow decline in listening. Apart from the sport. The sport's always held up well, the commentary on football games. I mean, I personally can't stand football myself, but the football matches, sport held up very well.
Right.
But the news output dipped and was continuing on a downward trajectory when I left. So
Right.
I don't think the listening figures are great, but that's the same across the board, though, isn't it, Chris? I mean, TV viewing figures are down because younger people don't watch TV on TV, TV shows on TV anymore. They watch it on YouTube or on Netflix.
And all that, don't they?
All that stuff. I think the time of watching TV won't be with us for much longer.
No.
And people will just they don't want a schedule, a TV schedule, where it tells them when they've got to watch the program. They want to have instant, viewing of a certain show whenever they want it. Maybe binge watch a particular series.
Yeah.
They want control. They want to watch it when they want to watch it. I'm not saying that's wrong. Someone wanting to watch stuff when they want to. iPlayer, of course, is trying to cover for that. But I think the time of a linear TV service won't be with us for much longer. And I think radio, and I hate to say it, I think the time of radio is going to be rather limited as well. And that would sadden me when radio goes. I may be gone before radio goes, but I think it's on a decline, and that does sadden me greatly because I'm although I started in TV, Chris.
Do you not think
radio.
Cars will keep radio alive?
I think that's what is keeping, because of course the government have wanted to close FM transmitters down for ages.
Yeah, years, 20 odd years now.
They want the bandwidth. But the plain fact is, DAB, it is improving, but DAB in cars doesn't always work that well, especially in the countryside and
It's got a lot better. It has got much better.
In recent years, it's got a lot better.
Yeah.
But of course, they make a big thing out of DAB, in the BBC themselves. They say, listening, wonderful quality listening to DAB. But do you know something? A lot of the time, the bit rate on DAB is less than you would get on an FM transmitter.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
And FM is better quality, believe it or not.
But to the average listener, I don't think they can tell.
No.
I don't think they can tell.
I mean, it's obviously my sound here being put across it, but
Danny's got another question for you here. Do you have...
Who, sorry?
Danny Drayton.
Oh, he
Engage
did jingle
Radio.
for me, so I'm a big fan of Danny.
Engage Radio. Does Mark have any memorabilia from his time at the BBC, either legitimate gifts or cheeky theft?
I couldn't possibly own up to cheeky
Have
theft.
you got a drawer full of microphones there, have you?
I've got... Well, for a start, one, I'm not an autograph person anyway. I've never been an autograph person. But we weren't allowed to ask anyone for autographs anyway, as part of the job. And two, I haven't really... They gave us, on the BBC 75th anniversary, which was, when was that, 1997?
Yes.
I think. They gave all their staff a special medal for the BBC for 75 years. I've got that. When I first joined BBC News in 89, after my stint in Night Entertainment, we were issued with personal headphones, because obviously we had to plug them into the tape machines and stuff, and we had our own personal headphones, which the BBC gave us, and I've still got mine. So I've got my BBC headphones, but I haven't got much else, to be honest. Oh, there's a couple of... They gave us all a BBC T-shirt to celebrate the launch of the BBC News channel.
Oh, right, okay. Got that, have you?
It was News 24 at first. Do you remember News 24?
Yeah, BBC. I still call it that, funnily enough.
They rebranded it BBC News, and when they rebranded it, they did some merchandise.
Right.
And they gave us all a sweatshirt and a T-shirt. Unfortunately, on the T-shirt front, they gave me a medium instead of a large.
Right.
And it doesn't fit. It didn't fit too well then, and it definitely doesn't fit too well now. Now they put on a bit of a middle-aged spread.
Gary Ross wants to know: did you nick any Blue Peter badges?
No, never saw. I mean, we didn't. That's children's TV. I mean, we never worked on Blue Peter, so no Blue Peter badges or crackerjack pencils. I didn't have any of those, I'm afraid.
Don't suppose you met John Noakes, did you?
John Noakes? No. Again, as I say, we didn't do children's TV.
Right.
I met John Craven.
Right. Yeah.
Because he did John Craven's News Round, which was the one children's show that we did do.
Nice man.
Because it was classed as a news programme, even though it was a kind of children's programme. But it was classed under BBC News, so we did do John Craven's News Round.
Nice man, was he?
Sorry, say again?
Nice man?
Yes, John Craven was great. The person who replaced him wasn't so friendly, but...
I don't know who that was.
If you can remember who that was, but...
No.
So, Juliet...
Was it a woman?
Yeah, Juliet, and for the sake, I'm not telling you a surname.
No, don't know. Don't know
I'm
who that
being
was.
coy. It's because of Morris.
Juliet Morris. Never heard of her.
Yeah. No. Well, she wasn't. I mean, she wasn't out nasty, but she wasn't that friendly.
Right.
But John Craven was. He was a lovely guy, John Craven.
Yeah.
And So no crackerjack pencils, no Blue Peter badges. Nothing like that, I'm afraid.
I got Vera here as well. She was a BBC researcher, and she worked there for years.
What did she do researching on?
Yeah, all sorts of programmes, I think. She said, where within the BBC were you based? I think you've answered that.
For the light entertainment stuff, I was based at Television Centre, Wood Lane.
Yeah.
And so I worked at TV Centre and the theatre on Shepherd's Bush Green.
Right.
Where they did Wogan and some other stuff down there.
Yes.
When I joined BBC News, I worked at both TV Centre and Broadcasting House, depending on whether I was working on a radio programme or a TV programme.
Yeah.
So Broadcasting House and TV Centre are the main two places I worked.
Right. Absolutely fascinating. Got a little message here from Jeff, who says, I'm looking smart tonight. Do you think I'm looking smart? I don't know if I'm looking smart tonight, really.
Well, I like the blue shirt and the blue... Oh, I was going to say, I thought you had a blue tie on, but
it's kind of a grey jacket thing and a blue shirt. And Paul in Cornwall says, hi, that's DJ Sparky. Do you know him? He's on Reach On Air.
Oh, Sparky.
DJ Sparky.
Who doesn't know Sparky?
He's with us today. And Vera says she worked in publicity. She didn't get a medal when she was there.
Okay.
But I think she's on a BBC pension as well now.
Perhaps they only did it for the cruise, but I mean, I definitely got a medal. But I'm sorry that Vera didn't get one.
Let's see if I've got any more questions here for you. No one else asking. No one else asking questions. Do you remember when you were talking right at the beginning there about these days, all those little captions and things? You said someone's typed it into a computer, and you said it was all made out of card. When I was little, I used to send off for stuff. I was like, dear BBC, please can I have some of the programme schedule cards that you show?
Yeah.
And they would put them all in a great big envelope and send them to me. Sadly, I do not have any of them. They would chuck them away when I left my house, when I left Mum's house. But when I
was a kid growing up, Chris, I was so sad. I wanted the test card.
Right.
But it wasn't on a card, the test card. It was even though it was called a card. It was on a slide. So I never got a test card.
Oh, right. I asked for that, and they sent me this BBC engineering pamphlet with a picture of it on there. Weird City wants to know, do BBC workers get a staff discount on the licence fee?
No. Which probably makes him very happy. No, we get no discount, and it's a sackable offence. If we if we've got a TV and we don't have a TV licence, and they find out, it's instant dismissal.
Right. Okay. Wow.
We did get the only thing we got discount from the BBC shop. So if we wanted to buy a BBC book or a BBC video, or something like that, BBC DVD in later times, we used to get 15%. That's 15, not 50.
That was right at the front.
15% off.
That was right at the front on the corner as you went in through the gates, wasn't it?
At TV Centre, yes. It was,
Never went. Never went in
And we
there.
got-
When I went to see a few programmes being made,
Yeah.
I always wanted to go in that shop. I was like, we'll go next time. I went to see Television Centre. I went to see Call My Bluff and
Call My Bluff, yeah.
and That's Live. And Call My Bluff, I'm sure they recorded 6 in a session.
Which Call My Bluff did you see? Is it the one with
The
Robert
guy,
Robinson and Patrick Campbell?
yes,
and
that's the one.
Frank
That's
Muir?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember
They're the
that
ones.
well. I didn't work on that, but I mean, I remember it well.
It was the first thing I ever saw being filmed, so
Yeah.
to speak. And we saw 1, and then we saw 2. Oh, well, that's great. And then they said, well, we'll come back in a moment. We're just going to change now. Then they did a 3rd one. And by this time, you want to go home. I'm sure they did 6, you know.
Well, that was often the case, Chris. They often did 2 or 3 shows at a time.
Yeah. I'm
And
sure
what
they did
used to-
6.
What they used to do sometimes, if it was an entertainment show, if you were going to get a shot of the audience,
Yeah.
they used to get the front rows of the audience to move.
Right.
They stayed at the front because but they were kind of moved from the left side to the right side.
Ross
So it
Patzelt
looked like. Sorry, go on.
Ross Patzelt said exactly that on the phone to me yesterday. In fact, tonight he's in London at possibly the Drury Lane Theatre. He got tickets to see Michael McIntyre's big show.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah, and he said he thinks they record 2 shows tonight, and after the first show they shuffle the audience around a bit, so it looks like they're a different audience.
Well, I think they probably. I mean, as I say, my night entertainment days were in the 80s, but they definitely did it in the 80s. Whether they still do it today, I can't possibly say, but they definitely used to do that.
Right.
Just to make sure that it looked like different people in the audience.
Okay.
And it wasn't filmed. And, of course, the people performing had to go off and do a costume
Yes,
change.
yes.
So it wasn't obvious it was the same week that they were
Right.
recording both shows.
We got another BBC person here, Heidi Young. What did you do in the BBC, Heidi? She's a messenger who says we got sod all discount when I worked for them.
Well, I'm surprised at that, Chris, because that was definitely a staff thing. It wasn't
Yeah.
just a crew thing. Everybody who was staff, not if you were freelanced or, a freelancer, you didn't get the discount. But if you were BBC staff, you definitely got the 15% discount. I think they may have stopped it. Perhaps they stopped it towards. I'm just trying to think because I didn't buy anything from the BBC shop for ages. I think they may have stopped it in about 2015, but so perhaps it was after that. But
Right.
definitely, for most of my BBC career, you did get a discount for buying from the BBC shop.
Right. But you didn't buy anything, no?
Well, I did years ago, but for the last 10 or so years, I found, even with the discount, I found it cheaper to buy it on Amazon.
Right. Did microphone technology move along much?
Microphone technology is the one thing that didn't change much.
No, because it was so good then.
The reason
wasn't
for
it?
that is because it's a tried and tested method, really. I mean, there's different kind. I don't want to get. Well, you can let me know how technical you want me to go, but there's obviously different types of microphone. And in broadcasting, the 2 main types we used were condenser microphones and dynamic microphones. Now, the difference between a condenser mic and a dynamic mic mainly is a condenser mic is the one you have to send what we call phantom powering to, which means you supply 48 volts to the microphone to power it up, and it has a little transformer.
That's what I've got
inside.
here, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the good quality mics, they tend to be better quality microphones. More sensitive microphones are the condenser microphones.
Right.
Dynamic microphones, you don't have to supply power to. They're more robust, so that you can drop them and they still tend to work. A condenser microphone, if you drop it, it can fail. But a dynamic mic isn't as sensitive, but that could be useful sometimes for certain audio, uses.
Right.
I mean, for example, sometimes with vocalists, if they were going to sing, we wanted to use condenser mics mainly for live vocals, but if they were going to sing with a band and the band were playing, we'd obviously mic up the instruments, but you'd often have the singer on a dynamic mic, and they had to work quite close to the microphone because of the spill from the sound from the orchestra going onto the singer's microphone. This was in the days before the headset. I'm going back to the 80s here, so we didn't have the fancy headset.
Would you use SM58s? You know, the Shure ones, because I've used those for years and years. You can drop them left, right, and centre.
Yeah, they're very robust.
I have SM58s that are over 20 years old and they've been dropped and it's all dented and they still work.
Well, they are. They're very good mics, and the mics we tended to use were AKG, Shure, Bear Dynamic, Neumann or Newman, however you want to pronounce it. They were the main brands we used. We used Shure SM58.
Right.
And then we had the personal mics, of course, as well.
Yeah.
The Sony ECM mics.
Little ones.
The ones that they pin on.
I got one of those.
Jacket. And, of course, we had radio mics as well. Like in news, a lot of the presenters are on radio mics.
If
they walk across the studio floor.
If there's anyone on here who wants to do internet radio, maybe Reach on Air or something else, or podcasts, what would you recommend as a sort of what's around today? What would you recommend as a sort of mid-range, high-end mic that's not too expensive?
I suppose what you class by expensive. If you say something in the range of
what do I mean by expensive?
AKG 451s.
Right.
You can pick up if you search about on eBay or somewhere. They are a very good quality mic, and they you can pick them up. If you bought them new, I think they're about £200. But if you search around, you can get them for under 100. You can get them for about 70 or 80 quid.
Oh, okay.
And they are. I mean, we did use them in the BBC. They are a professional microphone. But I mean, you can always buy. I mean, there's loads of cheap unbranded mics you can buy, which are more than good enough for internet radio. Really. Right. I mean, for my show, I use a £600 mic, which is a 414, which we used a lot at the BBC. I mean, if you're starting out in particular, because you may find that you start doing an internet radio show or podcast, and you may find you don't really enjoy it, or you don't want to do it.
Yes,
so why spend loads of money if you're going to pack it in?
Absolutely, I agree.
So my advice would be to buy a cheap,
cheap mic. Well, the one I've got
20 or
here,
30 quid mic, unbranded mic. It won't be sounding your best, but it could be more than good enough to do a few shows and have a few months using that. And then if you find you're into it and you want to, progress and then buy maybe a 451 or something else.
Lovely.
Up there.
Lovely.
I would no way spend loads of money initially, because you may, like anything, you may not take to it. You may not enjoy doing it.
I've got one here. Weird City wants to know, was the BBC canteen really as bad as it was portrayed?
Well, that's interesting now, because when
that's a great question, isn't it?
When I joined in 1980,
yeah,
TV Centre had 3 different canteens. There was a block off the side of TV Centre called Restaurant Block, and that's what it was. But it had 3 levels. You had a restaurant on the first level. Then you had a waitress service, believe it or not, on the second level, which is where kind of the talents went for meals with the management, to sign their contracts and over lunch, and then you had another restaurant on the third. So we tended to go either to the first floor or third floor. They were very similar. It was subsidised back then, back in the 80s, so it was really cheap. And it was it was in-house staff, and it was really good quality.
A lot of those.
It was very. The jokes were, not true. It was, not fancy.
I didn't think they were. I didn't think they were, because a lot of these large companies, certainly at British Telecom, when I worked for British Telecom, we had the most amazing canteen. Again, all subsidised, and you could have a full dinner and pudding for something like a couple of quid or something like that. And it was amazing.
The thing was, it was 24. Well, one of them was 24 hours a day, because obviously TV and radio in particular, it's a long-running operation, so they needed to have meal facilities all the time. So if you wanted a big dinner at 3 a.m, you could go and get one.
Yeah.
And but it all changed in about the late 90s, where a certain Mr. John Burt became the Director General.
Right.
And he decided it would be a good idea to sack all the catering staff We did have a strike over it, a BBC strike over it to support them, but sadly it didn't help them. They lost all their jobs, and we then had contractors take over the
and it wasn't as nice, was it?
We lost all the subsidy,
yeah.
No longer subsidised, and the quality went down. And by the time I left, Chris, no one was eating in the canteen anymore.
No.
It was dire. We had people off with food. I'm not joking now. We had people off with food poisoning after eating in there.
Wow.
So we just went out and got food from out.
Isn't that a shame?
Outside.
Such a shame. That's when these places are taken over by the bloody accountants, you see.
I know.
This is the trouble. Heidi Young, she worked for BBC Radio Devon in Plymouth and Exeter, then BBC, then BBC
Local...
Scotland. She says done loads of different jobs at Comedy Unit, and she was one of the most memorable at BBC Scotland. And she worked at BBC Radio 1 sessions also in Scotland. So that would be music, wouldn't it? Radio 1 sessions. Yeah.
And poor old local radio. I mean, it's always been the poor cousin, BBC local radio. It's never had the proper resources. It's run on a shoestring, always has been. And I have much respect for the people who work in BBC local radio because they never had the facilities we had, you know.
Do you think that'll survive?
Even when we did have a decent canteen, they didn't have that. They had vending machines and stuff.
Yeah.
So you asked me a question, what did you just say?
Do you think that will survive, BBC local?
No, well, the government's out to get it, isn't it? And I think... no, I don't think it will, Chris.
I mean, to be honest...
It's funny, really, because I don't quite understand. The politician's argument is the BBC is too, even now, even though they've moved some stuff out, the BBC is too London-centric. BBC is London-centric, concentrates too much on London and South East. And it needs to take account of local people, be more accountable to local people. And local radio, of course, is that. Local radio serves a local community. But then they say, why is BBC doing local radio? That should be done by the commercial people. And, you know, the thing they're asking the BBC to do is more local stuff, and then they attack the BBC for having local radio stations.
You can't compare BBC local radio with commercial local radio, because commercial local radio is like a glorified jukebox.
Yeah, I know.
And even then, you know, it's just... No, it's completely different. That being said, I think it depends where you are in the country. I think quite a lot of people listen, for example, to BBC Radio Lincolnshire, maybe BBC Radio London, but BBC Berkshire, where I am here, I don't know anyone that listens to it. You know, and I say that because I've been on both BBC Lincolnshire and BBC Berkshire. BBC Lincolnshire, I got a little bit of feedback from various different people. Berkshire, nothing. Not even a single extra subscriber to this YouTube channel, which I mentioned. Not one. And I got a few up there and then that sort of thing. So I think perhaps they need to look at that and see what is working and what doesn't work. But then again, they've got this whole switch away from programs for sort of older people who listen to it and then going for these younger audiences which just aren't there.
Well, Chris, look at Radio 2.
Yeah,
what's happening at Radio 2?
They're doing it now.
They are playing less and less 70s and 80s. They're playing more and more kind of current and more recent stuff, this century stuff, really. Steve Wright's got the elbow.
Yeah.
Some may say, well before time, you know, it's not to everyone's taste.
Yeah, there is that.
But they're clearing out the old guard. This happened on radio. This happened to Radio 1 years ago.
Yeah.
The famous Radio 1 clear out of people like Simon Bates, DLT, and all the old crew at Radio 1 were chucked out. And it's the same happening on Radio 2 now. And Ken, bless his heart, because I have worked with Ken, not on his Radio 2 show, but he did a documentary for 5 Live years and years ago. And he's such a lovely guy. Yeah. But I think Ken is next. And I think he'll be gone next year.
Really?
Mark my words. I think Radio 2 is going to be a complete new lineup. It doesn't want to cater to our age, you and my age groups, Chris, anymore. It wants to cater to the 25 to 40-year-olds.
So where do we go? Where do we go? You see, where do we go?
Exactly.
Nowhere
on the BBC.
Well, the other argument is, doesn't it have to move on anyway? Well,
yes, I suppose it does in a way, but you've got to cater for, you know, wide, you know, the older people are the biggest supporters of the BBC, really.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I mean, they're the ones paying the license, happy to pay the license. Well, I won't say happy to pay the license fee, because
no one's happy.
But I mean, they're prepared to pay the license fee. The over 50s, they support the BBC more than the younger audience in general. I know there's exceptions. And we're going to alienate them, especially if Radio 4 is cut back, which sounds like that is. I was talking to a colleague who still works at the Beeb,
right?
And it looks like there's going to be some changes at Radio 4, which, from what I've heard, and I can't really talk about them because they're I can't.
Do you know what?
One, I can't confirm them because it's only from a colleague, and I think if these changes are what I've heard they're going to be next year, I think it's going to alienate an awful lot of Radio 4.
Do you know I've started waking up to that? The
Radio
alarm
4,
goes off
the
and
day
it plays.
programme.
Yeah, it plays Radio 4 now.
Yeah.
And the reason I did that, we're all on this energy conservation thing now and trying to turn things off on standby and all that.
Yeah.
Well, to wake up, I used to wake up to my telly, right?
Yeah.
But to do that, it has to be on standby, whereas my Amazon device is on all the time. So I've now set my Amazon device goes off at 7:15 a.m. and I wake up to BBC Radio 4. How's that?
I've always been a radio
an indication of age.
Exactly. I've always loved radio in the day. I've never watched by choice daytime TV. I think before I came on to your show tonight, we had a quick chat, and we were discussing, weren't we, the same old faces?
Yeah.
The same. Philip
Schofield, sick of it.
Holly Willoughby, whatever her name is.
Phil. And, Paddy McGuinness, Alison Hammond, same people, all channels.
Thing. Time in, time out, same thing.
It's boring.
Same content. And I know some people enjoy it, and good for them. But I think it's time we had some new talent. And
I think there's so much out there. Now, take for example Ross Patzelt. Now, as you probably know, is an extremely good friend of mine who I've never met. I've always got on well with him. But you listen to him, and it's just like sitting next to a bloke in a pub.
Yeah.
Right? Where is that on the radio and the telly now? It's not on there anymore.
They couldn't have Ross Patzelt on, though, because he'd be late.
He'd be what?
Late.
He'd be late. Well, there would be a 7-second gap between the news. That's why he's never got the job.
You couldn't have a big gap. I mean, in the old days of BBC Radio, when we used the AM transmitters, if there was more than a minute's silence, they would turn themselves off.
Right.
They switched off, and it was a hell of a thing to get. I mean, I'm not a transmitter engineer by trade, but it was a hell of a problem to get them back on. Sometimes they even had to send an engineer out to the transmitter site, because not all the transmitter sites are manned.
You couldn't switch it remotely then?
Well, you could, but it didn't always work.
Oh.
On AM. FM was okay. FM would normally stay on, and if it did go off, you could turn them back on again pretty easy.
Right.
So when radio used to close down at night, which it did in the old days, they never completely shut the transmitters down. They just reduced the power to a minimum.
I didn't know that.
So the transmitters were always on. Because there was valves. The AM transmitters used valves, and that was the problem. If there was silence, for some reason the valves would just deactivate themselves and turn themselves off, which depowered the transmitter.
How fascinating. I didn't know that.
And the other thing was, that's why limiters and compressors were so important, because if you sent too loud a sound to an AM transmitter, it could blow the valve.
Right.
And then that was a site visit by an engineer to fix, and that could be 3 or 4 hours of the transmitter being off.
I'm with you.
And he didn't want that to happen, especially on the long wave, where the nuclear submarines put their mast up to check Radio 4 still broadcasting, and there hasn't been a nuclear war.
Kevin says my next door neighbour, where I used to live, he works on lighting at the BBC on the Top of the Pops.
So I say my crew didn't do Top of the Pops.
You didn't do Top of the Pops. Sorry, go on. John Parrish says BBC Canteen used to supply British Rail with sandwiches. Do you know anything about that?
No.
Don't know.
Don't
okay.
remember that.
Okay, that's all right. Dan Woodhouse says, I remember jokes in the 80s about the quality of BBC water.
Water? I don't remember those.
No, I don't either.
As far as I can remember, the water was okay.
Yeah. Weird City reckons Radio 2 is becoming the new Radio 1.
Well, as I say, they are playing more up-to-date music. So I suppose in a way it's moving closer to Radio 1, definitely.
Yes. And I think that's about all the questions. Let me just have a look on the text there, see if there's anything on the text there. Vera says she worked in publicity, Vera.
Oh, yeah, you
and
mentioned
she
that,
had...
Yeah. Well, my dad, as I said, my dad was a PR officer.
Oh, was he? Was that in
at
London,
ATV.
was it?
So, not at the BBC, but at ATV. So,
Well, she says we had...
in common.
She says we had a Christmas meal on the second floor. Was
Yeah,
that a thing?
That was the waitress service.
Oh, see, she knows. She knows
our
what you're going on about there.
Our management didn't give us a Christmas meal.
Oh, you poor
You
thing.
think yourself lucky.
Never mind. Well, Mark, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you tonight.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Chris.
Did you get everything said you wanted to say tonight?
I think so. I think we've covered quite a broad spectrum, haven't we?
Good. Now, when can we hear your excellent show on Reach On Air?
Well, I do 2 shows. The next one is on air in 1 hour and 2 minutes.
Oh, you on at 11?
11 to midnight.
Oh, okay.
I do an hour of kind of Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, all that kind of stuff.
Are you live, Mark?
I'm pre-recorded this week because I thought I'd take the precaution of, because I was doing this,
Right.
I didn't know how much prep time I'd have. So
Okay.
I pre-recorded it, and that's all uploaded, ready to go for 11 o'clock tonight.
Right.
And then I'm back on regular shows, Sunday afternoons, 2 till 5.
Lovely. Okay, thank you very much, Mark, for calling in. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Chris, and as I say, it's been an absolute delight talking to you as well.
Giving us an inside listen to the BBC. Cheerio, Mark.
Thank you, Chris. Ta-da.
Bye-bye now. Thank you, Mark. There we are. Something a little bit different for you tonight, boys and girls. Hope you enjoyed our little chat with Mark then. Thank you very much of those of you that sent in little messages and bits and pieces there. Was there anything else to say tonight? Did there anything else you wanted to say to me, gang? That you want me to pop into the chat box and have a look about there? We were talking the other week about, do you remember your first flight? And I haven't got much time left. I mean, we're nearly 10 o'clock now. I was hoping to talk to Mark for about an hour. It's turned into 2 hours, which is fantastic. It's not a complaint, but of course we haven't got to any of the other stuff. But Vera, we were going to do remembering your first flight last week, weren't we? And we didn't get to it then either. So I just wanted to read this email out from Vera, from Vera's Choice in the Morning, who says she remembers her first flight. She was 21. Going on a plane for the first time. My mother and I were going to Jamaica. Oh, I remember that fantastic song, The Jamaica Farewell. Do you remember that? Down away where the nights are gay and the sun shines daily on the mountain top. I took a trip on the sailing ship, and when I reached Jamaica, I made a stop. But I'm sad to say, I'm glad to say, I'm on my way. Won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around. I had to leave a little girl in Kingston Town. That sound right? That sound right? I'm sure that's the song. Blimey, it's years since I sung that. How do I still know the words to that? Isn't that odd? How on earth do I still know the words to that song? Anyway, she says, my mother and I were going to Jamaica for 2 weeks first, and then on to Boston for the last 2 weeks, a whole month in total. To me, being on a plane was like being on a train. The only difference was I couldn't get off when I wanted to. I didn't like the idea of being trapped in one area for that length of time. My mother had claustrophobia as well. My mother wouldn't get in the lift. Absolutely refused. She did not like enclosed spaces. Arriving in Montego Bay. Now, there's a song there, isn't there? Montego Bay. Oh, I got it right in the back of my head. Ask for that. Arriving in Montego Bay and stepping off the plane, only to be eaten alive by mosquitoes. Oh, you poor thing. That happened to me in Cyprus. Oh, my God. I'd been out with my niece and her family, and the boy, George, had been playing football. That was it. And we were watching him through this grid thing, just like They put a fence around a football field to stop the ball going over, didn't they? So I watched them through this. The only thing is, in this area, there's quite a lot of mosquitoes, and you don't really notice it now and again. Now and again, you feel something on your leg, and you just brush it off and don't think anything more of it. It's hours later those spots come up, don't they? Oh, and I can't tell you, I got back to my hotel in Limassol, and I put my legs into the bed, and I thought, they feel a bit warm, and very quickly they just were burning up my legs. That it was really painful, and eventually I rang down to the reception. And a lovely little hotel it was. I can't remember the name of it now. This hotel in Cyprus, highly recommended. Beautiful breakfast they did. Full buffet breakfast. Apparently the best in Limassol. They used to advertise it as. And I said, have you got anything for inside? And she said, I'll have a look. I'll ring you back. This bloke said. So he put the phone down. He said, look, I'm really sorry. I can't find anything. However, I think white vinegar is supposed to help. Come down. I'll give you some white vinegar and cotton wool. Dab that on there and see, and hopefully that will help you. So I went downstairs. He gave me a little bottle of white vinegar and a piece of cotton wool. No charge. Took it back up and I dabbed all my legs and I got into bed and I was still burning up. But eventually I went to sleep. And in the morning I woke up. All I could smell was vinegar. I don't know what the staff thought when they came to change the sheets. It stank of vinegar in the room, but I guess it helped. And of course, it's days that it was just covered in red bites. Very, very painful indeed. Funnily enough, this particular hotel, I mentioned the breakfast to you, and you could go in from outside as well if you wanted to have breakfast in this hotel, right? And I asked if I could, at night time, I asked if I could bring in my niece and her husband. I said, could I bring my niece and her husband in and pay for them to have breakfast? Yeah, no problem at all. Just let them know in the morning that you want to do that. Okay, so can I pay now? No, just leave it till the morning. Okay, thank you very much. So in the morning comes along and I go downstairs. My niece met me at a certain time. I think she rang up and said, we're nearly there now. Okay, so I went downstairs and I met them there and I brought them into the hotel lobby and the receptionist is standing there like that, behind us. Hello, I asked last night if I could bring my niece and her husband in for breakfast, and they've come now. I'd like to pay for this. And it was a bloke. He looked like the manager, to be honest. Got the suit on, the glasses, nice hair done, about 45 years old, I suppose. He said, oh, okay. He said, is this your niece now and her husband? Yeah, I said, that's right. How much is it, please? He said, no problem. He said, please, go inside, enjoy your breakfast on the house. Wow. Now that's customer service. Because at the end of the day, that doesn't cost them much. Pennies, probably. In actual fact, they probably have a load of food left over at the end that they just chuck away. But that's what you call customer service. Something that the world is very, very lacking of these days. Customer service. And absolutely, yeah, we went in and we had a little bit. Don't take the mick, you fill up with your breakfast and that's it. And we thank them very much on the way out, I can't remember if I gave them a tip. I probably did. Great service, Weird City. Absolutely, yeah. Really, really good service there, okay? Omar wants to know, how was the sunny... sunny, there's no sun out now. How was the Surrey karaoke gig, Chris, that you were looking into? Tomorrow. Going to have a look at that one tomorrow. It's in Caterham, so I'm meeting my friend Dino down there, who I just discovered he runs the council down there. I didn't know that. It's amazing, really, these people that you haven't seen for years and years, you knew as sort of younger lads, the same as I was in my sort of 30s, 35, that sort of age. And then years later, they come along again, 50s, 60s now. I hate to say it. Some of my best friends are in the 60s now. And suddenly they're doing these jobs. Wow, you run a council? And he knows this person's the particular pub, which I can't remember what the name of it is now. I better ask him again before I try and go tomorrow. But I'm meeting him tomorrow at 8 o'clock. And he wants a Thursday night. No, he doesn't want. They want a Thursday night, or they're thinking about a Thursday night. So I'm just going down tomorrow to have a look around. Okay, and I'll let you know, Omar. Thank you very much for asking about that. Okay, Fran, if you're still listening, Fran wants to say it was a really interesting chat tonight, and Fran is thanking you there. Okay, and I think that's about it today. Any more texts in? Yeah, one more text in from Danny Drayton, my mate Danny. Who I just want to thank Danny for earlier. He's been trying to help me get onto TikTok. If you were listening to Ross Patselt's show on Reach On Air, I know a lot of you listen to that, and please do. If you haven't, do listen to it. It's a great show. Ross and I, as I say, I consider him a very good friend, even though I've never met him. I've known him for about 15 years now, since the days of CMP Radio, which was one of the very first internet radio stations. It was after I was on Live 365, which was before CMP even, which was like in America. Anyway, and we have a lot of tate-a-tate going on between our two shows, right? But it's all done in the best possible taste. Like, if I hear something that doesn't sound right on any show on Reach On Air, I wouldn't say anything unless I really know the person well enough. It's like sometimes at the karaoke, yeah? Those of you that watch the live karaoke streams on Friday nights and Saturday nights from 8 o'clock, and it's very easy to find. Just type into YouTube Karaoke London and a channel will come up. Subscribe to that and you'll be able to watch our karaoke streams. And you will notice there are certain members of the pub who come in. Excuse me, I've got a really itchy nose inside the nostril. Hang on a minute, let me just... It's not a bogey, it's just got really itchy suddenly. It's probably a little hair rubbing against something. And you'll notice that there are certain members of the karaoke crowd, in particular Toby, who take a lot of flack from me, but they know about it, and we are very good friends. Right? Whenever you hear me sort of having a go at someone or they're having a go at me, it's likely we are very, very good friends. And Ross is one of those people. But if I hear something that's wrong on his show, I'll make a big thing about it on my next show. I wouldn't do it to probably no one else on Reach On Air I'd do that for. Okay, so do listen to him on Tuesday nights at 9 o'clock. There we are. There is his little poster there. There you go. By the way, he doesn't look anything like that now. That honestly, these people... You see, I'm doing it now, aren't I? These people that put on old photos of themselves, he doesn't look anything like that anymore. I'm telling you that now. For example, his face would now fill the whole of that square box. Okay? And by the way, I'm on there tomorrow morning between 9 and 10 o'clock with music, chat and fun. And I do very, very much enjoy doing my show at Reach On Air. I'll be honest with you, I enjoy doing that more than I love doing this, but I think I probably enjoy doing the radio more than I like doing this these days, you know. Greg is saying, night, Chris, take care. Thank you very much, Greg. Vera says, great show and wonderful memories from the BBC from Mark there as well. Kevin says, great show, Chris. Love the memories of BBC Happy Days. And there we are. All righty. Thank you very much, gang. Time to go, and we'll do another little show for you next Wednesday at 8 o'clock on this channel, okay? Yeah, I just wanted to thank Danny Drayton earlier. He was trying to help me get my radio show onto TikTok as well. I did try last night, but it appears that I need something to plug into this phone here. I thought I had the right gear, but I haven't, okay? So I've got to get something to plug into my phone. I was hoping to do it straight out of the computer onto TikTok, but I think to do it that way you have to have 1,000 followers, and I've only just gone over 800. 800 will allow you to do it live on a phone, but sadly not on there, okay? Heidi Young, Weird City, all saying thanks very much for the show, and thank you for watching, okay? Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday night, and I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock on reachonair.com. Bye-bye now.